Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. They blocked my only road with concrete, tried to trap me on my own land, said I had to comply or be cut off forever. I'm not part of their HOA, but that didn't stop them. What they didn't know? I don't back down, and I own more than just the land. I own the last word. For 10 solid years, my life was defined by peace, grease, and the gentle hum of country silence. My name's Corey Brenner, 44, single, stubborn, and proud owner of 12 acres of unbothered Texas soil. My land sits well outside the neat little boxes of suburbia. No cul-de-sacs, no smiling neighbors with passive-aggressive newsletters. Just me, my house, my auto shop, a gravel drive that kisses the highway, and enough space between me and the nearest HOA to breathe freely and think loud. Technically, there's a 50-meter stretch of land at the edge of my property where the HOA runs its utilities. Some fiber lines, a sewer main, maybe a water conduit or two. Years ago, we signed a basic agreement. They can use that strip for access to their infrastructure, and in exchange, they leave me alone. No drama. No drama, that is, until the winds changed. Back when the old HOA board was in place, we had what you'd call a mutual disinterest. They didn't like my loud trucks and the occasional burnout on Sunday mornings, but they respected my boundaries. I wasn't one of them, and they knew it. I was off-grid HOA-wise. My land wasn't part of their community plan. It never had been, and that was fine. Then came the regime change. I first heard the name Howard Klimp when a folded HOA flyer accidentally landed in my mailbox. New leadership, new vision, it said. I didn't think much of it. Another pencil pusher trying to feel important, I figured, but Howard was different. This man didn't just enforce rules, he worshipped them. Rumor was, he once fined his own neighbor for leaving their garage door open longer than 5 minutes. The guy walked around with a laminated copy of the HOA bylaws, like it was a sacred text. Soon, I started getting letters. Nothing dramatic at first. We invite you to consider formalizing your relationship with the HOA. But they kept coming, each one more insistent than the last. One particularly bold envelope contained a line that made me laugh out loud. Your property's use of our access road gives us reasonable basis to request compliance with HOA standards. Their access road? No, sir. That stretch of land is mine. The only reason their cables and pipes run under it is because I let them. I had documents, easements, and county records to prove it. So I sent a polite response with a copy of my land plat and a firm O. But Howard didn't get the message. He didn't want peace. He wanted obedience. And that, I knew, would be a problem. The letters didn't stop. They just got bolder, more passive-aggressive, and occasionally downright bizarre. One even came printed on official-looking HOA stationery with the header Notice of Conditional Access. According to them, if I continued to neglect appropriate community standards, they would review access permissions to adjacent infrastructural corridors. That's bureaucrat speak for we're thinking about blocking your driveway. At first, I chuckled. Then I got mad. My reply was a simple envelope stuffed with printed copies of my land deed, zoning documents, a signed utility easement agreement from 2007, and a note that read, "My land, my rules. Keep your bylaws in your cul-de-sac." I thought that would settle it. It didn't. A week later, I came home to find bright orange traffic cones neatly lined up along the edge of my driveway, right where it connects to that utility strip. There was no note, no work crew, no explanation, just cones. Like they were trying to mark territory. I rolled over one of them slowly with my truck just to make a point. The next morning, new cones, twice as many. That's when I installed the cameras. I wasn't taking any chances. One cam facing the road, one above the garage, two angled at the strip, and one hidden under the big oak tree where the deer hang out. Each had motion alerts and cloud backup. I wasn't about to let some HOA enforcers sneak around and claim I was trespassing on my own land. The footage they captured over the next few days was almost comical. There was Howard, dressed in full business casual and tucked-in polo, walking the edge of my property like he was inspecting a military base. Clipboard in hand, measuring tape dangling from his belt. He had a younger guy with him, some intern-looking fellow who kept nervously glancing at the private property signs I'd nailed to the fence posts. I watched them take pictures of my garage door, my truck, even my mailbox. One day, I stepped out while they were mid-inspection. Howard turned to me like a kid caught peeking at Christmas presents. "Mr. Brenner," he said, adjusting his glasses, "we're performing a routine perimeter review related to easement compliance." I pointed at the no trespassing sign, then at my cameras, then back at him. "You're performing a what now?" He cleared his throat. "It's within our rights to monitor." "It's not," I cut in, "and if I see you out here again without written consent or a sheriff's badge, you'll be monitoring the inside of a courtroom." Howard didn't like that. His mouth twisted like he'd bitten a lemon, and he motioned for his assistant to retreat, but he didn't leave quietly. "You may think you're beyond the scope of this community," he called over his shoulder, "but if you benefit from shared infrastructure, you must contribute to shared responsibility." I stood there in stunned silence for a moment. Was this guy trying to rewrite property law with moral philosophy? By now, the pressure was daily, letters in the mail, sticky notes on my gate. One time, I even found a printed HOA flyer slipped under the windshield wiper of my truck inside my garage. That meant someone had stepped right onto my property, inside the fence. It was getting creepy, and personal. I started getting weird looks at the gas station. A neighbor 2 miles down, who barely ever spoke, suddenly asked me, "Why don't you just join the HOA? Make peace." Peace. They wanted me to kneel, not negotiate. Then, on a rainy Monday morning, I opened my mailbox and found a thick yellow envelope. Inside was a formal final notice of non-compliance. The wording was nastier this time. It included phrases like termination of informal access, temporary obstruction, and physical consequences in accordance with HOA directives. Physical consequences. My heart dropped. I looked at the calendar, then out the window toward the road. That's when I realized something was coming. And it wouldn't be a letter this time. I came home later than usual that night. I'd been out picking up some custom tools from a guy in Waco, and the drive back was long, slow, and wet. Rain pelted the windshield, and the wipers squeaked against glass like they were tired of trying. As I turned off the highway and headed toward my drive, I felt that strange gut-tightening premonition you get before something bad happens, like the world's holding its breath. And then I saw them. My headlights swept across a bizarre scene. 3 massive concrete barriers sat squarely across the narrow stretch of gravel that connected my driveway to the main road. They weren't just placed there. They were planted, angled like they'd been dropped with purpose by a crane. Each weighed at least a ton. Spray painted across the middle block in bright red letters were the words, "Access suspended, HO directive." And there, standing under a plastic pop-up tent, as if this was all just a rainy day HO bake sale, were 2 guys in reflective vests, with clipboards, flashlights, and smug expressions. I slowed my truck to a crawl, rolled down my window, and blinked the rain out of my eyes. "You've got to be kidding me." One of them stepped forward like he was the gatekeeper of Mordor. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to remain in your vehicle. This entrance has been temporarily closed due to an active compliance review." "This is my entrance," I barked. "That's my road, my land, and unless you're county, state, or God himself, you've got no right to block it." He didn't flinch, just read from his clipboard like a customer service robot. According to Article 14, Section 3C of the HOA bylaws, "I am not in your HOA." The other guy, younger, clearly nervous, muttered, "We were told this was a gray zone." A gray zone? My truck was idling 30 feet from my own house, and I was being told by 2 fluorescent-suited nobodies that I couldn't go home. I got out, slamming the door, boots squelching in the mud. The older one put a hand on his radio like I was some kind of threat. "Sir, I'm going to ask you not to escalate." "You escalated the moment you dropped 3 tons of cement in front of my gate." I stomped toward the blocks, trying to assess whether I could maneuver around them, but they'd positioned them just right, tight enough to trap, wide enough to taunt. The only other entrance to my property was an old, overgrown path on the far side of the acreage, blocked by trees, and definitely not drivable in the dark. I stood in the rain, fuming. The nerve, the absolute gall. These people had gone from pushing paper to playing war. And here's the kicker. When I called the sheriff's office, the dispatcher was polite but firm. "If this is a civil access dispute and not an immediate emergency, you'll need to resolve it through civil court. We'll log the call, but we can't intervene unless there's a criminal threat or physical altercation." I laughed. I actually laughed out loud, standing in the rain next to a concrete wall someone had just built on my land. I could have screamed. I wanted to scream. Instead, I walked back to the truck, turned the engine off, and sat in the cab, dripping, steaming with rage, while the two HOA security goons stood under their tent, sipping from insulated mugs like this was business as usual. That night, I had to sleep in the truck. I wasn't leaving my property unattended, not with people bold enough to block my road like they were annexing territory. I watched them take shifts. At some point past midnight, one of them wandered into the bushes to pee and got startled by my deer decoy. I saw him trip, curse, and fall flat on his ass. A tiny, pathetic win, but by morning, I had a plan. A big, heavy, hydraulic plan. And if they thought cement could stop me, they had no idea what was coming next. By sunrise, I was done playing games. I drove into town in my mud-spattered pickup, grabbed a gas station coffee, and called in a favor. See, I once helped a guy named Jimmy fix the gearbox on his hydraulic crane. He swore up and down he owed me a debt of honor. That debt came due. An hour later, a flatbed rumbled up my gravel path, carrying a 35-ton boom crane and Jimmy behind the wheel, chewing sunflower seeds like it was any other Tuesday. "You want 'em moved or crushed?" he asked, deadpan. "Moved," I said, but creatively. By the time we rolled back to the concrete blockade, the two HOA officers were already back at their posts. When they saw the crane and my truck pulling up behind it, the younger guy did a double take, then stumbled backward over a folding chair. The older one reached for his walkie-talkie. I hopped out before they could say a word. "Gentlemen," I said, "you've had your fun. Now it's my turn." Jimmy didn't wait. He extended the crane's arm with a screech of metal and lifted the first barrier clean off the ground like it was a Lego brick. As it swung in the air, twisting slowly, I pointed toward the entrance of the HOA office complex, just down the hill, maybe 50 yards away. "Set it right in front of their front door," I said. Nice and centered. And he did. With the elegance of a ballerina, that 3,000-pound concrete slab landed directly across the glass entrance of the HOA headquarters, like a stone exclamation mark. Jimmy grinned. Next, the other two barriers followed. One went across their staff parking lot exit, the other smack dab in front of their little white and blue "Welcome to the Community" sign. As the last block landed with a hollow thud, I walked up and hammered in a signpost of my own, freshly painted the night before. "Road closed due to HOA non-compliance." The two guards just stood there, jaws slack, clearly realizing that I wasn't. Bluffing, I never was. A few neighbors gathered nearby, watching with cell phones in hand. I heard chuckles. A guy in pajama pants whispered, "Dude's a legend." By noon, someone had already uploaded a video to YouTube. The title? "Redneck Robin Hood blocks HOA with their own concrete." Within hours, it had 50,000 views. The comments were glorious, but of course, I knew it wouldn't end there. Around 3 p.m., a manila envelope was hand-delivered to my gate. Inside, a formal cease and desist, stamped and smug. The HOA was suing me for vandalism, public endangerment, and, my personal favorite, hostile misuse of construction equipment. I couldn't help but laugh. They wanted war. They had it. So I called my lawyer, a guy named Raul, ex-military, now civil law pitbull, and started gathering everything. Footage from my cameras, land deeds, survey maps, screenshots of every threatening letter they'd sent. But I didn't stop there. That night, I printed out flyers of the original easement agreement, blew them up to poster size, and duct taped them to every surface of the concrete blocks now decorating HOA HQ. Across the top, I scrawled, "This is your legality in action." By morning, the neighborhood had picked sides, and mine had a crane. I didn't expect the HOA to show up at my gate the next morning looking like they were staging a political coup. But that's exactly what they did. 3 SUVs rolled up like a presidential motorcade. One of them a black Escalade with tinted windows and vanity plates that read, "Rules 1." I knew who that was before the door even opened. Howard Klimp, the paper-pushing tyrant himself, emerged dressed like he was on his way to testify before Congress. Navy blazer, khakis, HOA lapel pin. Behind him, 2 enforcement officers, both built like vending machines and wearing matching windbreakers that read "Compliance Unit." And let me tell you, nothing says overcompensating like hiring mall cops to guard your cement ego. I stepped out of my garage, arms crossed, waiting. Howard spotted me and walked up like he was approaching a podium. His face wore that smirk bureaucrats reserve for moments when they think they've trapped you in some fine print. "Mr. Brenner," he said, voice dripping condescension, "this stunt with the crane has escalated matters beyond simple negotiation." I stared at him, silent. "We are here to give you one final opportunity to dismantle the obstruction and sign the compliance agreement. Otherwise, we will be forced to involve further legal and possibly—" "Howard," I cut in, "your concrete's blocking your own damn office. Your lawsuit is built on fairy dust, and you're standing on my property while trying to give me ultimatums. You sure this is the flex you want to pull?" He turned red, then pink, then a weird purple that made him look like a microwaved beet. One of the compliance officers stepped forward, trying to loom over me, which, considering I'm 6'3", just made him look like a linebacker who missed leg day. "Sir," the man growled, "we need you to step back from the boundary." I am the boundary. That's when things popped off. The second officer reached out like he was about to grab me, maybe to escort me back to my imaginary HOA dungeon. Bad move. I shifted my weight and caught his wrist mid-reach. "Touch me again," I said, low and steady, "and I swear you'll be filing an HOA claim from the ER. But the guy yanked his arm and shoved me with both hands. I stumbled back a few feet, not far, but enough for something in me to snap. My boots hit gravel, I regained my footing, and before my brain could talk my body down, I launched right back at him. I tackled the guy shoulder first, sending us both into a pile of trash cans near the gate. Lids went flying. A bag burst open and spilled used oil rags and half a carburetor across the path. The dude tried to get up, slipped on the oil, and cracked his elbow on my lawnmower. Howard screamed. The other officer lunged in, but as he came forward, his foot landed square on a rolling socket wrench, and he went down hard, flailing like a cartoon moose on ice. He slammed into the side of my truck and knocked the side mirror off clean. Now it was just me and Howard. He tried to run. I swear he made this squeaky gasping sound like a tea kettle with asthma. But his loafers weren't built for muddy driveways. He slipped once, tried to recover, slipped again, and ended up face first in a wheelbarrow full of goat feed. I didn't even know I had goat feed. He groaned, rolled out, and staggered upright with cracked glasses and oats in his hair. For a glorious half second, I locked eyes with him. And he knew. He knew he'd lost this war in the most humiliating way possible. And then came the sirens. Deputies arrived just in time to catch the aftermath. The bruised compliance officers, the bent mirror, Howard's oat-covered corpse walk. I stood calmly with my arms out, waiting. I wasn't running. Hell no. I had 3 security cameras capturing every second, and neighbors were filming from their porches like this was WrestleMania. One of the deputies walked up, chewing gum with zero urgency. "You the property owner?" "Yup." "They say you assaulted them." I pointed at the cameras. "They touched me first." I just responded, "With enthusiasm." The deputy chuckled, looked over at Howard, who was trying to clean birdseed out of his blazer pocket. "We'll need statements." But looks to me like this was a bad day for their PR team. Howard tried to regain composure, pulling himself upright and puffing out his chest. "This is far from over, Brenner. I will see you in court." I shrugged. "See you there. Bring a towel." Because the gloves were off. And the next round would be in a courtroom. I'd never been in a courtroom before, but as I stood there in my cleanest boots and my best button-down shirt, staring across the aisle at the man who tried to wall me into my own land, I felt one thing above all else: ready. The courthouse buzzed like a beehive. Neighbors showed up. So did a few reporters. Word had gotten around. Some came because they wanted to see justice. Others, I suspect, just wanted to see Howard Klimp finally get his comeuppance. The HOA tyrant who'd gone full concrete dictator. Howard didn't disappoint. He entered with that same smug look he'd worn when he first measured my driveway with a tape measure and an inflated ego. His suit was probably more expensive than my truck. His lawyer, a wiry man who looked like he'd never changed a tire in his life, shuffled behind him with an armful of binders labeled compliance violations. I had Raul. Raul doesn't do theatrics, he does results. Ex-Army, now property rights attorney, and the only man I've ever seen make a county inspector cry using only legal precedent and a 3-hole punched folder. When the judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Judge Strickland, called the case to order, Howard's lawyer went first. He painted a picture of me as an aggressor. a reckless, non-compliant property owner who refused to cooperate with community integration. He spoke of public risk, infrastructure dependence, and unauthorized use of private access. According to him, I had benefited from HOA resources, for years freeloading off the shared passage like some kind of driveway parasite. I sat there letting it wash over me, watching Howard nod solemnly, like he wasn't the same man who had shoved literal tons of concrete in front of a private home. Then it was our turn. Raoul stood slowly, buttoned his jacket, and began. Your Honor, this is not a case about community values. This is a case about power, misused, misrepresented, and masquerading as civic duty. Mr. Brenner owns his land. He has for over a decade. And that includes the access road in question. The HOA's actions were not protective. They were punitive. One by one, Raoul unfolded the truth. First came the easement documents, legally binding, clearly defining the HOA's rights, utility access only, maintenance and nothing more, not passage, not regulation, certainly not obstruction. Then came the footage, the cones, the letters, the concrete, the confrontation. We played the video from my security cams on the courtroom monitor the moment I returned home to see my road sealed off like I was being evicted from my own life. The jury saw it all. The smug expressions of the HOA officers, the signs, the standoff. Then came the best part, the footage of the crane, lifting the barriers and placing them neatly in front of HOA headquarters like oversized Monopoly pieces. I couldn't read the judge's mind, but I swear I saw her smirk. When Howard took the stand, his composure cracked like cheap vinyl. He tried to speak in polished phrases, protecting property values, reinforcing structural governance. But when Raoul pressed him with one simple question, "Did you authorize the placement of concrete barriers on Mr. Brenner's private land?" Howard stammered. I was advised. Yes or no? I believed it was. Yes or no, Mr. Klimp? Silence. Yes, he finally muttered. And that was it. The room shifted. You could feel it. Even the gallery leaned in as Judge Strickland leaned forward, her tone cold and clear. Mr. Klimp, the HOA does not have dominion over land it does not own. Your actions exceeded the bounds of your charter and veered into intimidation, obstruction, and abuse of process. Then she turned to me. Mr. Brenner, this court finds in your favor. Just like that, the war was over. I was awarded full injunctive relief. No further contact, interference, or enforcement by the HOA. I was awarded $120,000 in damages. And the HOA itself was placed under court-supervised audit for potential misuse of funds and authority. The final blow, Howard was formally recommended for investigation, possible civil penalties pending. He didn't speak when the gavel came down. He didn't have to. His face said everything. The same man who once stood in front of my home like a gatekeeper of righteousness now looked like a kid who got caught cheating on a math test. Red-faced, trembling, and desperately hoping no one would post the footage online. They did. As Raoul and I walked out of the courtroom, reporters fired questions. I didn't answer. I just tipped my hat, looked toward the horizon, and thought, one man, one road, one concrete reminder that freedom isn't HOA approved. 3 months after the trial, the concrete blocks were still there, but now they had a very different purpose. I kept one right by the road just off my driveway, polished it up with a power washer, and mounted a steel plaque to the front. Laser etched in bold black lettering, it read, "This block once stood on my road. Now it stands on their reputation." And just beneath that, freshly spray painted once a month. Seul 1 month without HOA authority. It became a local landmark. People took selfies with it. Bikers used it as a mile marker. Teenagers dubbed it the Freedom Stone on social media. Someone even created a Google Maps pin for it. Brenner's Block, home of the HOA beatdown. But that was just the icing on the post-trial cake. Life had shifted. Howard Klimp. Oh, he resigned from the HOA a week after the verdict, though resigned is a generous term. The board ousted him after a private emergency meeting where, according to one source, he tried to accuse me of hacking into HOA security systems using military-grade surveillance. Yeah, apparently he thought my Deer Cam had NSA capabilities. He tried applying for a local planning commission seat a month later, but the internet doesn't forget. Turns out, videos of a grown man face-planting into goat feed while screaming about bylaws aren't great for political clout. Last I heard, he moved 3 counties over and started working as a compliance officer for a gated RV park. Poetic, really. As for the HOA itself, it was chaos. After the court-ordered audit, turns out Howard had spent thousands in HOA funds on private consultants, legal fees, even catered lunches for strategy sessions. The remaining board was sued by its own residents for mismanagement. 3 of them resigned. 1 tried to deny everything, then got roasted during a community meeting when someone played back one of his own speeches over the PA system. Eventually, the entire HOA was forced to restructure under court supervision. They had to rewrite their charter with outside legal counsel and adopt something called neighbor consent clauses. Translation: no more rogue rule enforcement without community vote. In a beautifully ironic twist, the HOA hired Raul, my lawyer, to consult on their new governance process. They couldn't even reform their mess without paying the guy who wiped the floor with them. Meanwhile, life on my property? Peaceful, gloriously so. My driveway was clear, my land was mine again, and my workshop had never been busier. Turns out people love taking their cars to the guy who beat the HOA in court. Word got around. I had to start turning jobs away. Too much demand. I even hired a second mechanic, a quiet ex-HOA member named Ray, who told me on his first day, "You're the reason I quit that circus." We planted a vegetable garden where the cones used to sit. Built a picnic table near the oak tree with a perfect view of the Freedom Stone. Every Sunday, I sit there with a cup of coffee, boots kicked up, watching the sunrise through clean Texas air. And the neighbors. The ones who used to keep their distance, unsure which side to take. Now they wave when they pass. Some stop to chat. A few even asked for copies of my easement agreement, just in case. I hosted a 4th of July barbecue on my land, and damn near the whole neighborhood showed up. We grilled ribs beside the old barriers, now laid out like monuments to a battle won without backing down. At one point, a kid walked up to me, wide-eyed, and said, "You're the guy who body-slammed the HOA president, right?" I smiled. "That's what the internet says." He nodded solemnly. "My dad says you're like suburban John Wick." Not sure about that. I don't own a suit that nice, but I appreciated the sentiment. The best part? The silence. Not a single letter in my mailbox, not a single compliance warning or passive-aggressive flyer. The HOA knew better now. Everyone did. And that's the funny thing. In standing my ground and refusing to bend, I didn't just protect my driveway. I reminded an entire neighborhood that boundaries mean something. That paper pushers with a God complex don't get to rewrite your life just because they hold a clipboard. And that sometimes the only thing stronger than HOA bylaws is one man with a crane and a cause. Final spray paint count on the Freedom Stone, plus 3 months. And counting.